Today I'm really going to show you through the 5 absolute bare minimum exercises that we recommend every runner should be doing in their training. We understand life can get in the way often, and we find that when we don't have time, strength training often is the first thing to fall by the wayside because we don't want to miss out on our run training. My name is Devlin Eyden from coachparry.com. So before we jump into the strength exercises themselves and I'll show you how to do them, we always drive home the importance of strength training. It is key that we make sure that you can prep your body, and the strength training component is what helps prep the body for the load and the training stress that we are going to be putting ourselves under with the volumes of running, with the intensity of running that we will be doing throughout our program. It also is a component that really helps us get through those really tough sessions, those hill repeat type sessions and speed work that we're going to be doing at later stages in the program as well. So it's key to make sure that we're doing the right kind of strength work with the right technique and allow our body to be strong enough to handle that, as well as actually recover quite quick after these sessions because we are adapted to be able to handle the load. So let's jump into the first of the 5 exercises, the squat. So there's quite a few key areas that we need to make sure from a technique point of view are absolutely sound. The first thing, I'm going to show you a front and a side view to help with this. But from the front view, the first thing we're looking for with a squat is to have your feet about shoulder width apart. If you tend to find that you might be slightly immobile around the hips and the ankles, you could potentially have your feet a little bit wider than your shoulder width apart, but ideally shoulder width apart for the squat. A key element here, if I turn into a side view, is to make sure that the weight of the weight is really centered over your heels for this movement. Absolutely key, and we drive this home a lot, is to ensure a good back position, you want to have your shoulders back and your chest out, standing up nice and tall to start. I'm going to do this exercise with my hands on my hips. You are also welcome to counterbalance with your hands out in front of you. But hands on the hips, shoulders back, chest out. We are looking directly ahead of you, and you are going to drop by pushing your bum backwards. So again, you can have a look. My back is nice and flat. I'm pushing my bum backwards, bending at the knees, and making sure that the weight is on my heels. A key area here is to make sure that your knees do not extend past your toes. So you don't want to be in that position where you are coming up onto your toes and your heels are lifting off the floor. So again, shoulders back, chest out, squatting nice and deep with the bum backwards, as low as you can go, and standing up straight, locking up the knees, pushing the hips forward, and still keeping a nice straight torso. Again, we'll squat nice and deep, weight on the heels, bum back, shoulders back, chest out, and standing up straight. I'm going to do 1 or 2 from the front. Again, feet shoulder width apart, shoulders back, chest out, squatting nice and deep, also making sure that your knees are tracking nice and straight and not diving inwards, and standing up, pushing the hips forward. Weight on the heels, push the bum back, and standing up nice and strong. The second of our 5 exercises is known as the hip march. So starting lying on your back, always making sure that your head is relaxed on the floor. You don't want to keep your head up. Nice and relaxed, knees bent at 90 degrees, and you really want to focus on driving the heels down into the floor. So knees bent, drive those heels into the floor. Your feet are going to be about shoulder width apart, and you can place your hands on the floor next to you to allow just for a little bit more stability. First part of the movement is driving the hips up. So you want to squeeze your glutes nice and tight and try and keep your body as flat as possible. And then the hip march itself is a hip flexion action, keeping the knees bent at 90 degrees. And we're going to march the right leg back with the toe flexed back towards the head, and then back down, not dropping the hips before the other side marches, knees bent at 90 degrees and driving the heels into the floor still. We're going to alternate sides, making sure we keep our hips up. You don't want your hips dropping every time. So keep those hips up nice and high and march with the toes flexed back towards your head. Keep driving the hips up, squeeze the glutes, heels into the floor, and we march. All right, so the third exercise we recommend is an eccentric calf raise. I'm going to turn my back to show you how to do this and what the real key focus is. So you're welcome to use a wall or lean up against the wall. Even leaning up against a chair helps as well. Leaning up against the wall, standing nice and tall. Again, with this one, you can have your feet a little bit closer together. You don't necessarily want your feet touching, but your feet nice and close together. Keeping those knees locked, we're going to shoot up nice and high onto our toes, so really driving up. You want to hold this for the count of 3 seconds. So it'll be drive up, 2, 3, and then slowly back down, going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, back to the floor. So to do that and talk you through more of a real time, it's going to be drive up, 2, 3, down, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll do that again. Driving up hard, 2, 3, down, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the eccentric calf raise really, again, for the amount of pounding and hammering that is happening on our legs, if you think of the ankle mobility that's happening, how many times your calf or your calves rather have to activate and fire during a run, it's absolutely key that we make sure we are doing this nice and slow, and that the eccentric part is the slow downward movement. So drive up sharply, hold it, 2, 3, and slowly back down, 2, 3, 4, 5, allowing the heels to come back to rest. There can be a slight variation depending if you have done enough calf raises, as well as if you have got the ankle mobility for it. You are welcome to step up onto a small step or a box with your feet over the edge and do the exact same movement, but when you're dropping down, just allowing the heels to drop a little bit lower than the horizontal. The fourth exercise in our sequence is what we call a glute bridge. Now, I'm going to use a stability ball. You are welcome to use a box or a chair or a coffee table. The stability ball actually makes it a little bit more difficult. Obviously, it's rolling all over the show. So I would suggest starting out with something nice and stable like a chair or a coffee table that you can keep your feet up onto. The idea here is you will lie back on your back with your feet up on your box, for example. You can have your legs nice and straight, feet together, and all we're going to do is drive the hips up towards the roof, squeezing the glutes nice and tight. Keep the neck nice and neutral, so head back, hands at your sides, and we drive those hips up into the air. Hold, 2, 3, and then relax back down to the floor. Again, we're going to drive up, hold, 2, 3, and relax back down to the floor. If you would like to make it a little bit more tricky or a little bit more resistance, you can move away from your box slightly, so it's just the heels digging into your box. And the same would apply, driving up nice and high, squeezing the glutes, and relaxing back down to the floor. As I mentioned, the stability ball adds another whole component to this. So only advance to this once you feel you can do the technique on a good stable surface first properly before moving on to something like a stability ball. The fifth and final exercise. Okay. The fifth exercise in the sequence that we have for you is known as the dead bug. This is a really good exercise because it's a little bit more whole body. So we're focusing on core activation here. We're focusing on some hip flexor work and hip mobility, as well as a bit of shoulder mobility. It does take a little bit of coordination, but I'm going to talk you through this. So starting off, lying back, again, keeping the neck nice and neutral. We want to get your feet up in the air with your knees bent at 90 degrees and both arms nice and straight, pointing up towards the roof. It's important to try and keep your feet elevated the whole time. During the exercise, you start concentrating on the coordination and your feet tend to drop towards your bum. I want you to keep your toes flexed back, both arms pointing up towards the roof, looking up the whole time. Pull your belly button down towards your spine so your back is nice and flat on the floor. And we are going to extend my right arm behind my head at the same time as straightening the left leg. So it's the opposite arm, opposite leg extensions, keeping the left hand up at the air or pointing up to the roof, knee up, and then coming back to the top before the other side goes down. So left hand, right leg, come back to the top. Make sure that you always come back to zero. You don't want to be bicycling the whole way through. So both hands, one hand is always pointing at the roof, one knee is always pointing at the roof, and it's an opposite extension. Make yourself nice and long, come back to the top, extend on the opposite side, and back to the top, keeping those feet up, toes flexed back, and keeping your belly button pulled in towards your spine as not to arch your lower back. So if you're interested to find out how these strength training exercises can fit into your running training, we've put together an incredible video that will help you get the balance right between the strength training and the rest of your running training. If you're keen to watch it, click on the link on screen now.